Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd here again today. Another exciting guest for you. This guy's out of Cincinnati area. He just started about less than a year ago. He's already got 3 parks. He's got 2 more on the way. Father of 3 little kids. Please help me in welcoming my guest, Miles Noland. Miles, thanks for being here.
Oh, great. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great, man. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got an MHP, so we can get to know you a little bit, and then we'll dive into some specifics on your experiences and your lessons learned.
Sure. I had a small fitness business. Also did some online stuff. It kind of went under. It was hard. I got into medical sales. And I was basically just studying for about a year and couldn't figure it out. I knew I liked real estate, but I couldn't, nothing really felt right. And listened to a bunch of podcasts and honestly, I started building a list at a VA in the Philippines. But I didn't put a ton of time into it because I was working so hard. So it really took me a couple of years to kind of really study, feel comfortable, and really get going in the MHP space. And then about a year and a half ago, I had a little bit more time and I was able to, dive in and really start cold calling, doing some more marketing. And then things started to actually progress and get me closer to doing my first deal.
All right, great, man. So tell us in that first deal, how you got in, and then you found it to be a cold call, sounds like. And I know you've also done a deal that's via master lease. I want to talk about that deal as well, which I don't think was your first deal, because that's a more complicated structure in some respects. I'm just curious how that deal in particular, but in general, how you found your deals, and just essentially for our audience, there's a lot of guys out there that want to do what you're doing. You've got a job, you've got a young family. I want to do something for myself, entrepreneurial, passive income. Obviously, MHP is a strong asset class, and you have found a way to get in, and now you're going pretty quick. So tell us how for the rest of our guys, how do you pull it off, and how can we learn from it?
Yeah, and I tell everybody, first off, it's going to be way harder than you think it is. Like if I'd have known it was going to be this hard, I probably still would have done it, but it was probably 10 times, and it took 10 times longer than I thought it would. So I think a lot of people give up too soon. When it gets really hard. But yeah, I made a ton of calls, and what I said wasn't perfect, but I just tried to be really consistent. I'd call 2 to 4 hours a week over. I just did about 9 months, I tried to target 4 hours or less from where I live. This deal, I know a lot of people don't like West Virginia, but my family's from there, and my aunt and uncle live in this town in West Virginia, and then kind of near Morgantown up north. So I knew it, and I'd been there, and I found this guy who thought about selling, had good conversations. He's like, yeah, just come up and meet me, I'll sign the contract. So I drove 5 hours, meet the guy. He gets weird, and he doesn't want to sign, and I'm totally frustrated. I'm like, I just took all this time, a couple days, but he said, I got a friend, he wants to sell. And like this park was nowhere on my list. It wasn't on Google. So I called this guy. It's a smaller park, 21 spaces, 15 occupied, all tenant owned, city water, city sewer. He's like, well, it's not that nice, but I mean, it's, in a decent area right off the highway. Hey, I'll give it to you for what I bought it for 17 years ago, 180 grand,
Wow.
20 grand down, seller finance. I'm like, that's, I know it's small and it's not right next to my house, but that's, too good to pass up. And so, and the funny story about that is it took me like 3 months to get him to sign the contract. He finally signed it. It was like a 2-page contract, but if I send this guy a 20-pager, he's, mom and pop, he's going to get overwhelmed and never sign it. So we got it done. And then, I've been going around and around for about 14 months with the other guy, and just got his park, which is 45 spaces. I'm only 5 minutes down the road from this one, under contract about 6 weeks ago. So that was where it was like a miracle, So now we're going through DD on that one. So
that's great, man. Well, yeah, lesson learned there. Persistence, obviously, and then you mentioned mom and pa. I think you're right. That you got to spend some time with mom and pa sometimes. They don't always care about the highest price. In this case, the guy didn't even make any money. I mean, and he's going to finance it for you. Most likely, he did that because you built a bond with him. He liked you for one reason or another, and that's great. You can get a better deal than me or the next one. I love those stories. That's how That's how people, the new guy, the little guy competes, is you're nimble, you're relatable. I tell like my managers, we got a big park here in Kansas City that we're basically, I say flipping, but we're going to keep it, but it's basically a major infill, and we're competing within a mile against Strive communities, Sun communities, and RHP within about 3 miles. Three of the five biggest players. Strive was from the old Frank and Dave portfolio, and we're just kicking their butt. And I say, why are we kicking their butt? I said, one, we're working all the damn time, which is not the best idea, perhaps. But two, I said, this guy said, you are one phone call away from every single decision. Those guys have to go to committee, district manager, regional vice president to do something different. Like, hey, can we move this home 2 feet to squeeze another home? Hey, can we fast track the permit? Hey, can we sell this home like this? Can I do a discount on this? Hey, this person wants to put 2 decks on the other side of the deck. There's one-off questions, and there's more complicated ones than that. This person approved, they got this, and the bureaucracy slows down the deal. So we get the lead, we get them closed, boom, boom, boom. And we've had several people that are down the street at a Superior Park, frankly, that Sun owns, and they come to Sun. I guess recently sold it actually, but they come to us because we can get them in faster, we can move things faster, and so on. So it's just another example of your little guy, competing against the big guys for something you do great. That's awesome. So tell me about the master lease deal. I'm interested in what you guys did differently from a negotiation standpoint as well as a due diligence standpoint.
Yeah, no, you're right. The nimble and the small can be an advantage, and a lot of people don't really think about that, but there is definitely like an advantage in speed. So I totally agree. Yeah, in the master lease, this park was actually 10 minutes from where I grew up, just about an hour and a half from where I live now. And my mom actually lives near there. So I was able to, bond with the seller over the area. He knew I kind of spoke the language. I knew where everything was. And it was a follow-up process. First, it was COVID. Second, as the accountant went to, Latin America for 3 months. It was always something. So, but finally he was ready to do it, and he was a pretty sophisticated guy. He's actually an attorney, but he was really worried about his tax burden, and he told us, like, look, I have not done a good job paying attention to this thing. I'm supposed to be managing it for the last 3 years. I don't even think I've been there. I'm not. It's bad, and he told us that. But in the area, a half mile away, it's just absolutely booming. It's Class A apartments, assisted livings, retail, just stuff being a new home, $300,000 home, $400,000. There's stuff's being built like crazy. So we really believed in the location.
Sure.
And honestly, I mean, I thought the price would be around 1.5, 1.6, but he was stuck on 1.9. But in this situation, it helped him because he was really worried about his tax burden. He was even offered a better deal on seller finance, but he knew that this thing was rough. And I talked to him so many times, emailed, that he kind of trusted me and my partner's experience to come in there and like spend a lot of time on it, clean it up, make it better, do some evictions because the tenant base was breaking rules really rough, and kind of get it into shape. And this helped him with his taxes. So we made sure we got an attorney in the state where the park was located who had some real estate experience to draw up an ironclad, agreement that really, fit the state laws, so that we knew that was really important. And then we only had to put 8% down. So 150 grand down. So that was a benefit to us to get into the deal with a lot less money down. That will be credited to the purchase price upon refinance or sale. And but unfortunately the monthly payments are not. So that's, there's pros and cons for the seller and for us, because we don't technically own it yet, but we do have first right to sell it. It's a 3-year term. We can sell it after year 1 or refinance after year 1. We don't have to wait 3 years. So there's some benefits there for us. It gets us in the deal with lower money down, in a great location. It's also city water, city sewer, only a couple park-owned homes out of 64 homes. It's 79 pads in a great location. Granted, the tenant base is rough. It's one of the, and it's direct bill. So all those things are like the bones of it are good, but there's pros and cons on both sides. So
Sure. No, I think that's good. I mean, one thing that I want to cover that you just mentioned is, in this case, you admit, I'm paying more than I ideally wanted, but I'm willing to do so because of a different term, right? So that's how it can work for both parties. The seller, in many instances, prefers his cash price. This guy sounds like maybe didn't for his tax situation, but prefers a set cash price, but will agree to finance it perhaps for more money and for recourse or for some other certainty. So it's a good idea. And I recently, we had a deal. We have 11 homes to bring in this new park, and I was evaluating, do I want to do used homes or new homes? It's kind of on the fence of being a new home community. It's a good market. It's just the community's a little tired. And in my pro forma, it made more economic sense to do all new homes, even if I sell them at a $5,000 loss a piece. I got about a $55,000 eat for my 11 homes in my budget, but that's from a cash on cash for my investors for syndication. I only needed 55 cash to have 11 new homes. 11 new homes versus 11 used homes are going to decrease my cap rate, give me a higher quality tenant, make the park look better, have more staying power. There's some ancillary indirect benefit. But if I'd have done 11 used homes at 20 grand a piece, that's 220K. So the 220K on the initial cash outlay was going to drag down my yield so much and impact that cap rate as other ancillary factors that it actually made more sense for me to spend more money on more expensive houses. Not to mention, it's a lot easier to find new houses, order them, than to find used houses that fit the right sizes and all that. So again, that was me agreeing to have a -1 term, in this case, lose $5,000 per sale, which is what I thought I have to do in this market, in this trade area, and these sizes lots, versus get new homes that have used homes, they're cheaper, but then impact the cash yield. So that's awesome that you guys are weighing those pros and cons. And obviously, ideally, you get the best of both worlds, but sometimes you get a stretch. You don't want to stretch, or you don't want to pay more, shorter DD, worse reps and warranties, more hair on the dog for the same price. You got to have something that's an offset. And in this case, the market is great. In particular, bones are great. So that's cool.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people are just looking for a cap rate on the front end. And I think maybe more inexperienced people do that. And that's the way I was for a while. But there's just so many more factors that go into play in terms of location, of terms, things like that. And there's so much competition now that you can't just say, oh, I want a 9 cap like day one, or, you're probably not going to get a lot of deals. So, I mean, just some of that creativity. And we had, honestly, another master lease under contract in Indiana, and we dropped it in DD. It was so rough, the park, but we've spoken to some apartment investors that have done that commonly, and help us get a little bit higher level of comfort, as long as you have an agreement in that state, that's done by a good lawyer. And it can just just different creative ways to kind of help the seller out, but also getting the deal with lower money down can kind of put you ahead of maybe somebody else bidding on that deal.
Sure. And while you're talking about master lease, and I'm not going to ask you, I didn't work on your deal. But I'll tell you, here's some mistakes that I think people sometimes might make on a master lease, is they treat it like a lease instead of like a property they're going to buy. And they cut corners on due diligence, in particular on things like a phase 1 environmental and on title work. You can't get a title policy because you don't own it. I think you might be able to, actually, I don't know, I've never asked title company that, but you can certainly run a preliminary title commitment and see if there are any problems, because a doomsday scenario would be you're making all these payments, you put the down payment down, you get ready to go buy it, and the guy has bad title, and you can't even sell it to you. Or then you figure out you got a phase one environmental, it's a nightmare, and you don't want to buy it, and you just waste all time and energy. So I see people. I lost an auction one time, and it was the same thing. I was the only guy out of 25 bidders that got to phase one. They got second on the auction, but the last guy, the guy that won didn't do it. And the way that the terms of this auction, where you had to put up your money and you had to close, there was no out, there was no due diligence. It was like you commit to buy immediately after the auction. And I was like, well, if I'm going to commit to buy, I want to make sure I'm not buying a lemon. And there's only one phase one engineer in this trade area. And I hired him. I said, anybody else hire you for this? He said, nope. So I said, the other 20 guys didn't do it right. And so far I got away with it, kind of, so to speak. But anyway, that would be a moment of caution for our listeners, that, treat the master lease with, the same lens you treat the purchase.
Yeah. And that's just talking to you. I hope I'm saying the right things because I'm not an attorney, but yeah, correct me. But, and that's exactly what we did. I mean, we did a phase one, we did the title work. We just treated it like we were buying it because
Right.
That's the plan down the road. So we were able to do all that, and we didn't uncover anything, but it gives you that peace of mind,
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's the point. I mean, it's like I tell people, I've got life insurance and I didn't die yesterday. So did I waste the money, or was I protected just in case? Right. And phase one, you hope you don't find anything, but you still got to. I've had failed phase ones. I've had failed phase twos. I've had to dig up tanks. I've had to do geothermal imaging, ground penetrating radar, and none of those things are fun, and none of those things are inexpensive. But to some degree, that's the cost of doing business, as opposed to buying a lemon. So anyway, that's good. But what other tips and tricks do you have? I know you've got other deals and you got other experiences. What are you doing now in the marketplace to find new deals? For example, you've obviously been some of the bread and butter, cold calling, building your list, building your database. Any other secret sauce you're willing to share?
Yeah. The list is gold. So I mean, it is an investment to build a list. I was busy, so I paid somebody to do it, a virtual assistant. But you can't go wrong with that list, whether it's you or somebody else making the calls. I've tried for a bit to have somebody else make the calls, but it really just it's gotten tougher because a lot more people are doing it. And so I'm in some of the states I'm in, perhaps aren't as sexy as a lot of states, but that kind of helps. But also, I think taking more of an indirect approach can really reap some benefits if you're looking at this thing long term. So I mean, it's not easy when you don't have a park, but just being relentless, showing up, being willing to meet sellers in person is a huge thing. Like, they trust you so much more if you can meet them in person. And just playing off, I called a lady yesterday. Hey, I own a couple parks. She interrupts me. I don't want to sell. And I'm like, oh, that's good, because that's not why I was calling. Who did you use to bring in homes? Because I'm looking at bringing in a couple of homes. And she told me, and 10 minutes later, she's like, okay, I'm going to save your cell phone. Like, call me if you need anything, if you need any advice. It totally changed the conversation. Like, she doesn't want to sell. But someday, if she does, I feel like I've left a more favorable impression than saying, "Hey, do you want to sell?" like that, and then there's no way she's not going to want to follow up with me. And
Right.
so I'll keep that conversation going. But being able to really hyper focus on areas where I already have a park and say, "Hey, I own this down the road. What would you do with this?" And then by the end of the conversation, I'll work it around to, "Hey, have you thought about selling?" But the feeling of the call is where I'm actually like getting their advice or providing value, and everybody wants to give good advice. So that seems to have been, and for a long time, I'm just like, hey, do you want to sell?
Right.
But I think the more and more people call, that's kind of getting a little tougher. So I just try to leverage like anything I know in that area. Hey, my aunt lives there. I have a friend that owns a park there. I just try to find some sort of common ground to be a little bit different than the other people calling. And as you go more and more, you kind of get some more leads, like via networking, by broker relationships from other sellers, or maybe you buy a park and the seller owns 6 parks, and now he's like, hey, would you want to buy these two others that so the more you can dig in and just, I really feel like just getting that first park is such a huge lift for the confidence level, the knowledge of like getting the whole, process done. Um, and just the sales thing is just being relentless, honestly, and just and following up and trying to add some value. And it's not very fun, it's really not. So, but I mean, it's important. You think about, like, if I wouldn't have done that, none of this would have never happened. And every call, I'm like, God, sucks. I'd rather be doing anything else, right now. So I think just, it's not easy, but there's nothing really more valuable. So
No, that's great. I mean, you're differentiating yourself. You're building rapport. You're not just another guy calling. I get some of those calls, and will you sell? And then you get them that are disingenuous. So I think it's good that you find something that you can actually you know build a relationship with them on. Like, hey, I own the park on the street. Did you see that the college is adding a new football program or something that's real? You can build rapport. I get them sometimes when people say, oh, hey, one of my clients, one of my investors, I just drove through your park. I say, oh, really? What'd you think about it? I loved it. What'd you think about my new playground? Oh, loved it. I don't have a playground. Oh, you weren't just driving through my park. You got a California phone number. You know, you didn't, or a Philippine accent. Like, you didn't just drive through my park. You're not building rapport, right? So you're doing the opposite, which is great. And you're definitely right that there's certain things that aren't fun, but those are the things that set us apart, right? I can't remember the exact quote Dave Ramsey has, but basically, do things now that no one else will do, so you can do things later that no one else can do. From a financial standpoint in particular,
I love that.
it's a mortification, if you will, or we live in a immediate gratification society. And for example, I got out of college, had a good job. I could have went and lived downtown in a nice apartment, and went out to bars and had fun and all that, like some of my buddies did. Instead, I said, I'm going to buy an investment house, and I built a room in the basement, and I put another room upstairs, and pretty soon I lived with 5 guys. But you know what? I lived for free, and I made $500 a month, and had a good job, saved 100% of my salary. I bought the house on the street, did another one, Pretty soon I had 5 houses on the block, and my friends are still determined they want to go to grad school, and they got no money, but they're chasing women every night. I delayed that gratification, and I saw the fruits financially. So that's great. You're going through the pain, if you will, of cold calls, which I don't know anybody likes cold calls, frankly, but it's a necessary beast if you're going to find deals when you can't compete on price, you can't compete on resume. You're not a private equity group, you're not a REIT, you don't have a team full of exits guys. You need to compete on rapport, and on being nimble. And that's awesome to see success stories like yourself. It's great.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it opens it up, just kind of the focus too. I was targeting, probably 10 states, and I just couldn't do the follow up good enough, and I couldn't. And so now I'm just hyper focused on the couple areas where I have parks, and it also allows. I mean, we just got a 19 pad, has a single family house and a little duplex on it, but that deal doesn't work like if it's just by itself. But we already own 2 parks, within 30 minutes. And so that can work because of the scale of management. So it really opens you up to, more deals. And it was easy for me to build. And then I met the owner of the park that backs up to it. It's another 15 spaces. I taught his daughter in high school when I was a high school teacher 13 years ago. So it's just like, when you're in your area, it's a lot easier to find common ground. And then, like, all of a sudden that little 19 space turns into a 35 space, because the guy is going to sell me in it'll be a couple of years, but he's going to sell it to me in a couple of years, and it's right next door. So just little things like that, just focusing on a couple areas allows you to really, I think have more opportunities, find common ground, and scale it. And ultimately, like, if you ever want to exit, that's what people want. They don't want one random 30 space park 6 hours away, and then they want the all right there. So if you ever want to sell it.
Sure, economies of scale. It's great, man. What other, I know you've only had a year or so of operational experience, but are you have any other tips, or you've given us a lot of tips on the acquisition side and finding deals. Do you have any other tips or lessons, whether operations or otherwise, you want to share before we part?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's kind of more my role is the acquisition part of it, but um, honestly, the money is not as important as a lot of people think it is. So, like, say for example, you partner with somebody that's mostly bringing money, but people don't realize how tough the operations can be. And so, if you have somebody doing that for you, that's great. They're worth their weight in gold. And just know it's not a passive. It's not a passive. It's not an office building. It's not a passive investment. So you're going to have to, either if you're doing it yourself, you're going to have to put a significant amount of time towards like communicating with your manager, just learning, following up, and doing things that aren't honestly that glamorous. But just know it's a very important part, and that really makes or breaks, especially once you get a few more parks. You have to have some systems in place and a good manager in place, because you gotta take care of the park. You gotta fix things. Obviously, number one, you have to collect the rent, and just putting some systems in place where it's more than just handing you cash, is so important to really the success of your investment. So I mean that people need to know that that's really important. It's not just buy it and forget it. So that, I mean, and I know I didn't give you a ton of like perfect details, but I just think just knowing that part is really important, and it's more difficult than people think it is, especially on these turnaround deals. Just know that going in.
No, I think that's definitely wise. We're hiring a regional property manager right now, and I was telling my assistant who posted the job, we're not in the real estate business. I used to be in the real estate business. We're in the operations business. Mobile home parks are very management intensive, very operational. If you get a stable deal, maybe in 88 pads, 87 full, no parking lots. Okay, maybe that's just passive real estate. I used to have triple net leases, right? CBS was a tenant. That was passive. They sent a check every once in a while. There was a roof leak or something. For the most part, it's very low maintenance. That wasn't as lucrative because there's competitive, right? So there's lower yields. Those deals are cheaper or lower cap rates. But the mobile home park business, I agree with you. That is a good advice. Look, don't get overextended because it's going to be management intensive. If you're not willing to do it or capable of doing it, somebody on your team, whether a partner or an employee, needs to be competent in that. And like for my regional manager position, we put in there minimum 3 years mobile home park experience. In the last 2 days, I got 50 applications. It's a bunch of hotel guys, bunch of office guys. Like, do not read the description. I don't care if you have a lot of hotel management. I'm sure it's a great skill, but it's not outside right now in 4-degree weather under a trailer with a salamander heater defrosting pipes. Okay, and I got guys out there right now doing that. And I was out there on Monday, with 2 pairs of long underwear on. Right? This ain't the hotel business, which is frankly a hospitality business, not a real estate business, but it's not the office business. It's an operations business, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's the reality of it, and that's part of the reason I think the returns can be a little bit better too, because not as many people want to do that.
That's right. All right, Miles, this is great. Any other things you want to share before we go? Where can people find you also before I forget? If you want
to. Yeah. No, I'm my website ain't quite done, but it's called Treeside Communities, and it's close. And then same thing on LinkedIn, Treeside Communities. So just trying to grow that. And it's I think if you have a will to like really progress in the business, you'll figure out a way, whether you have a bunch of small kids or you have a full-time job, or just find a way to do the things that matter most, and be consistent, even if it's only a few hours a week. And I think if you don't quit, you'll get one eventually. So
sounds good. Thanks, Miles. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Ferd. Take care.
You got it.